It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley recover from their CES coma to talk about the latest with Windows 8, Windows Phone, and enterprise computing. I know that's exciting. It's all coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley. Episode 244, recorded January 19th, 2012. Can you put Linux on that? Windows Weekly is brought to you by Hover.com. Hover is domain name registration and management that's simple. Upgrade to a premium domain and trade in your old clunkers at windows.hover.com and use the offer code WINDOWS to save 10%. And by Ford, featuring all-electric and hybrid electric technologies. Learn more about the technologies Ford is bringing to its vehicles at ford.com/technology. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show that covers all your Microsoft needs right here, all in one. Everything from the enterprise to Xbox 360, all in one. It's amazing. Paul Thurrott is here. Mary Jo Foley is here. And we are talking about all things Microsoft. You know, the last time I saw you guys was at CES.
Yes.
And
that was a rather convoluted discussion.
I apologize because...
No, it's not your fault. But I have to say... So not only was that edited well, but it was done rather quickly.
Yeah. Credit to Jeff Stewart, our marvelous editor.
Look, you can see my Kinect over there lonely on the floor.
Yeah, you know, a Kinect without an Xbox is like a day without sunshine.
I'm cleaning my office, so everything's askew.
This is so weird to see. This is the same room we normally see?
Yeah, but it's tilted, I guess, 45 degrees.
And on the door, you have a sign that says "The End of the World" in French.
That's it's. By the way, that's a sign for an awesome Quebecois beer maker.
What a surprise!
Le Fin de Monde is one of their beers.
This is a beer, has always been a beer-soaked show. Thanks to you, Mary Jo. So, but I learned something. I learned something from CES. You don't really need me. I just get in the way of this program. You guys were so good together. I'm listening, thinking, crikey.
You know, Leo, it's like when you look in the room at your children in the playpen and you realize they're okay.
They're playing together. They're Googling and cooing. Yeah, and you're just not there.
They're setting little fires.
We were IMing to each other. I'm like, are we supposed to talk now? Are we not supposed to talk now?
So just so you know, what happened was we had it all set up that we would have Skype, a three-way Skype, which would be recorded here at the studio because I was coming up from CES, and it's the only way we could have a real-time conversation. And even though we had 6 megabits up from a very good connection at CES, a wired connection, it picked that exact moment to die.
Yes.
And it came back, and everything was fine. But it decided that we're not going to do it. It struck.
Let me tell you how I remember it, because I think what happened was you played that terrible Microsoft video.
Yes. The tweet choir.
It went south from there.
The Skype said, "I'm not going to do this. I will not do this." You're right. The tweet choir is what broke it.
We're blaming everything from now on.
Tweet choir.
Yep.
Anyway, so I'm gonna do a little bit more standing back from now on in the show and let you two, with your natural rhythm, kind of run this show, make this show happen. You're so good together.
You're so lazy.
Yeah, that's the truth. Paul Thurrott is the editor-in-chief of the SuperSite for Windows, WinSuperSite.com. Mary Jo Foley does all about Microsoft for the ZD Net blogs with multiple posts. And Aaron Greenberg tweets, "It's snowing in Redmond." Not snowing in New York. Not snowing in Dedham.
You know, this is beautiful because obviously with global warming, you see this kind of crazy weather pattern thing occur. And I know that Alaska, for example, has gotten way more snow than normal. Not that they don't normally have a lot of snow, but I guess it's been even worse than usual. And, of course, Redmond is over in that part of the world. So now they're getting dumped on, which is great because I've spent my entire life being dumped on by snow. And now this year, we had a dusting the other day. We had inches of snow back in October.
It's just weird.
I don't think I can ever think of a year here that's had this little snow.
I know. Same here.
It's
Yep.
really dry.
And when you're from this area, of course, you tend to think that means we're in for it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that there's
You're
gonna
gonna get
be
it.
some payback.
God's going to punish us.
Yeah, but for right now, it's
So
he calls it Snowmageddon.
Snowmageddon. That's what cracks me
Yeah.
up. Does it? I don't know how often it
So that
snows
must be
in
the
Seattle.
520 he's looking at. Is that what I'm?
It is. It's 5:20. And anybody who's been to the Microsoft campus and sees this picture will just not even believe this picture because
Yeah, because it's
first
usually
there's like
clogged with cars.
7 inches of snow and there's no cars on the road.
Yeah. Wow. Well, they're smart. They
Yeah, they're
they're not
smart.
going to drive in that because they have no experience.
Well, Aaron's not too smart. Apparently, he went into work.
He says though it's just me, finance, and legal.
Yep, because today is Microsoft earnings, so those guys have to
They
be there.
have to be
today.
there. Now, do we have the earnings clock ticking? Are we watching to see what they will say?
It's 5 p.m., isn't it?
Why do
our
they
time?
do that to us? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yep, not yet.
Yeah, so we're not gonna
Not yet. Today.
make it.
They always wait till after the shows. I don't know why they do. Apple does that too. Oh, well. Hey, I read with great interest, and I'm going to let you two comment on this because I'm sure you have something to say about it. That, I remember last time the folks at Microsoft talked about a new file system was something called Longhorn. And
What do you mean?
and then what was that called? Object file system or something? I forgot what.
WinFS.
WinFS.
Let's see.
So now we have. This is almost a joke. I mean, like an unconscious ReFS. Let's do it again.
Well, except when Steven Sinofsky says something, that it is going to happen.
So what is ReFS?
It's a
It
good
means
question. Actually,
resilient file system.
Oh,
you should bring up the Building Windows 8 blog. There's a particularly
Yeah.
helpful chart on there that will explain everything you need to know about ReFS. But basically what it looks like is a coming replacement, or I would call it an evolution of NTFS. It's going to be server only in the beginning. It's going to be specifically for the file server workload. Yeah, scroll down. Here we go. We got the picture if you're watching the video. There it is. There it is. See that? There you go. That's the difference.
Now you know everything right
instead
there.
of a wave, it's a straight line.
Right. And that's an important distinction. I can't tell you why.
I was going to say why.
Well, I understand. I don't know why they drew the line like that because that's goofy. But I see what they're saying, which is we're going to replace the NTFS disk storage engine with a new disk storage engine. Otherwise, everything else will be the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Am I right? Did I read that properly?
I believe
Although
it
we
is supposed
can't figure
to
out
be
what that little
more-
bump is there.
Well,
Maybe
it reaches more into the operating system than
Yeah.
it makes no
I think
sense.
maybe sometimes it works better than others. It's hard to say.
Underneath this reused portion, the NTFS version of the code base uses a newly architected engine that implements
Leo,
on-disk
Leo,
structures
let me
such as the
let me head
master.
this one off.
Go ahead.
Because I can tell you, I've read this thing again and again. You're not going to find the answer in there.
There's no clue.
It's
No clue at all as to what the wave is.
we don't know what the wave is.
No.
I think they did it just to see if we, the scribbling class, would spend all hours talking about it.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time. Remember on that chart they released a build where Internet Explorer and something else were out on the side, and we went on and on.
Yeah,
about
they knew.
how wrong this thing was.
Yeah.
These guys, they're infamous for this. I think they could possibly do it on purpose just to keep us busy while they worry about the important stuff. It's just. I don't know.
Here,
I think it's some-
here, look at this. Okay, we'll be back. Watch this for a little while, and we'll talk to you later.
Watch us wind up the squirrels.
And if that weren't enough, then just read this paragraph afterwards. On-disk structures and their manipulation are handled by the on-disk storage engine. This exposes a generic key-value interface, which the layer above leverages to implement files, directories, etc. For its own implementation, the storage engine uses B+ trees exclusively. Do they describe what is new in ReFS? Can I call it ReFS?
No.
And I think if I were to boil it down, I would say it appears to handle data corruption better, i.e., is more resilient. Thus, the name of the thing.
Maybe this picture will help explain how
Yes.
everything will now be stitched together. See, there's the wave right there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
ReFS.
Maybe.
Do you see why I'm as insane as I am?
You've got, how long, did you read this over and over and try to parse it?
Yeah, no, I actually tried to
did too.
understand it.
Yeah.
I'm not
And
a smart
did you?
person, Leo, but
Well, but did you? Were you able to?
no.
Make no sense of it whatsoever.
I mean, I got the high level bit, which is what I just said. I really think this is just an evolution of NTVS because they wanted it to appear. I think because Sinofsky maybe or this team wants to believe their mark on this thing, they're not calling it NTFS. I'm not saying this is a dig at Dave Cutler or the NT guys. I don't know, but it seems like this is those guys putting their stamp on this. It's really just an evolution of NTFS.
It does look like most of the features of NTFS that are exposed to the higher level, like BitLocker, ACL list, journaling.
But some of them aren't, by the way.
Right. They're dropping a few of them,
Oh.
they said.
Yeah. So, but I think it's going to improve over time. You can't boot off of it. You can't use it on external storage. Those things will come. It will eventually be added to the client. You know,
Wait. You can't boot off of it.
No.
Well, what is that? I don't. You mean I have to use
you would need
NTFS for my
on the
boot drives, and then I'll use Refus for storage drives?
Still can't call it Refus. And
I'm calling it Refus.
yes. And
I could call it Refuse or Refuse. You should accept Refus. What are we calling it? RFS?
EFS. ReFS. How about that?
Say it fast. ReFS, Refus. It's
not to be confused with WinFS, not to be confused with NTFS.
Is it a file
I think
system? No.
Yeah.
They say it is. I mean,
That was
they're
the thing.
saying
WinFS
it's the
wasn't.
new file
WinFS
system.
was really just a storage engine,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's something
But
that
they're calling it a
augments-
file system. They're saying
calling
this is the new file system. For
But
Windows.
the file system is NTFS plus REFS. Because Refus doesn't do
in a
anything
way.
by
I mean,
itself.
eventually, no. ReFS, you could format a disk with this
Oh, you could.
system. Yes,
okay.
for file storage.
And then you wouldn't need any additional services. It provides all the services. Because it looks like the upper layer engine was inherited from NTFS.
That just means it's part of it. In other words, we evolved this from NTFS.
I see. It is its own thing.
Yes.
Entirely standalone. Except you can't boot from it.
Not yet.
Seems
but you
odd.
will be able to in the future. Well, this is in keeping with the way they did things. You know, they've developed other file systems like FAT32 and XFAT and, of course,
Right.
NTFS versions and so forth. And as these things come in, the capabilities improve over time. And I think they'll be doing that with this. And Windows 8 may get it in a future service pack. It may come as part of Windows 9. We don't know yet. But it will eventually make its way down to the client as well.
You know, the one thing I thought was really interesting about this is the way people discovered the existence of this back last year when it was codenamed Protagon, and we talked about it on the show, actually then. It was in the client at that point. It was in one of the client leaked builds. So it's interesting they're making this a server-only product when it comes out.
That
To me.
suggests to me that this thing just wasn't going to be ready
Yeah.
for them to meet that deadline, that doesn't exist. And that they can just put the parts of it they need in for the file server stuff and then finish the rest over time.
And this is part of storage spaces, which we talked about last week, right?
Well, it works with storage spaces. I don't believe you
Yeah.
need this for storage spaces because storage spaces works on the client. So I think storage spaces will also work with NTFS.
Oh, okay. They work hand in hand. They complement each other as two components, one might say, of a complete storage system.
Yes, one might say that.
One might say that.
If one were writing a blog post.
Hey, but nobody's going to complain about something that makes the file system more robust and less prone to corruption, right? That's not a bad
Unless
thing.
it's not in Windows 8, yeah. So
Unless you don't have it.
the thing that I found odd was they announced this in their Building Windows 8 blog. It's not a feature of Windows 8.
Oh.
It's only going to be in server.
But eventually Windows 8.
Eventually Windows. They actually didn't say that.
Wouldn't
so
necessarily be 8. Might be 9.
Might be 9.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Might be a
It's
service
something
pack,
after Windows 8. Right.
I found that to be an odd choice for that blog.
Yeah.
What
That's-
comes
that's an
after
interesting point.
Windows 8? Windows
Right.
9.
Or Windows 8 Service Pack 1,
Oh,
like
could
Paul
be.
said.
Could be a service pack.
Yeah.
Although you don't really want to upgrade the file system
Yeah,
in a service
pack.
That sounds
I
like a
know.
recipe for
Yeah.
disaster.
We cannot guarantee the sanctity of your data, but please click here to upgrade the file system.
All right. That's Refus. Or as
Refus.
some would call it, REFS. files, ReFS. Windows 8, you kind of little backhanded dig I noticed in your tirade moments ago, does not have a release date.
Oh, right. Like which backhanded dig was that, lady?
Does not have a release date, but we do have a new next beta coming along soon. Round 2. Right. What do we know?
One, there were reports the week of CS, not from CS, but from a different, I guess it was like an analyst meeting of some kind, where the director of public relations for Microsoft, Janelle Poole, provided some interesting information. The thing that she was most quoted for is she mentioned October. And really all she was doing was reiterating what Stephen Snofsky said back at Build. He said almost exactly the same quote around, we tend to have releases every 3 years. Our last one was in October. This October would be, an obvious, timing for us. And that was widely reported. But she said something else that I think was even more interesting. She said, we're talking milestone to milestone, and for us right now, we're talking about the next milestone being the consumer preview.
Consumer preview.
Happening in late February. And that's the first time I've heard someone call it that. But when you consider that the first milestone they released publicly was the developer preview, that name actually makes a lot of sense.
Sure it does.
And I speculated in a blog post that perhaps the release candidate might be considered something that they would send out to enterprise customers or business customers as the one for them to use to evaluate the OS. So we have the version for developers, we have the version for consumers, which is the beta, and then we have this version for businesses. Maybe they'll call it a business preview or something like that. But I thought that was interesting language because it really does reveal something about it. It tells you that this is when Microsoft expects normal people, if you will, to evaluate Windows 8. The quality will be such that, people could, like normal people, normies.
I
know it's a tough way to say it.
Normies, yeah.
Non-tech enthusiasts.
You people.
You mean people like me?
Well, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Let's not go too far to say that.
No, it's true. I haven't got the beta on the developer preview on anything I own. That's too early for me.
It's too early. And I don't think a normie would either. I think this is still enthusiasts.
Yeah, totally.
Hardcore.
Paul, I wonder if the reason she didn't use the word beta is because something we've talked about before, is it really appropriate to say Windows is now a product that's beta tested the way we used to use the word beta?
Yeah.
I mean, when we said beta tested before, we mean people test it. The feedback is taken into consideration in modifying the product. And
you're laughing because that's not what they do. Right?
That's not what they do.
Well,
that's not what they do.
Here's another
anymore.
one. I mean, in the same line.
Or maybe they're looking for bugs. How about that?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what they are. But see, unfortunately, the people who test Microsoft products for them, I know this is a crazy idea, but when you ask someone for feedback, they actually expect you to consider it. And I don't think that there is a lot of consideration of that stuff. The other thing is, you consider the point of a milestone like a release candidate, literally, historically, if you will, and by historically I mean in the past 20 years, a release candidate was a build of the code that was being considered for the final release, right? There's no way that what we would have called the release candidate of Windows 8 would ever actually ship as Windows 8. This thing will appear some months before Windows 8 ships, right? I mean, so maybe this is, I think Mary Jo is suggesting that maybe they are changing the language to match what's really happening, that these things are just pre-release versions.
We don't really care what you think.
Well, they're milestones of some kind. I'm sure they have to sort of, whatever they're calling it these days, but they essentially branch the code to, free stuff.
Right. This is it.
Because here's the stuff we want to give to you people. Yeah. And then on the side, they're doing other stuff that will appear in the next milestone.
But I should point out that in the developer preview, they said the same thing. We're not going to pay any attention to you. You can say anything you want. This is it. We're not changing it. And
I'm pretty sure that's not how they said it.
No, but that was the impression I got. Okay. And they did. They shortly thereafter, they said, okay, we'll give you I can't remember what it was, an on-off switch for the tablet interface, something like that. Right? Didn't they? I mean,
they're making some tweaks, but I think a lot of people who used to beta test Windows in the older days, they were thinking like, they would do what they used to do when like Jim Alcham was there, like, okay, rip up the product, let's start over, right? Like, you guys don't like the interface, let's do this over. Right. Not happening.
No, I understand.
I wish I could find this. There was an incredible quote from someone in Microsoft. Mary Jo, maybe you're familiar with this. A guy in the UK said in some public forum that they were going to change Windows 8 based on feedback. Did you see this story? I wish I could find it. I don't know why I can't find it.
That story.
So the reason if I could just, it's too bad I can't find it. But what he said was, well, okay, maybe it was because of developers. He said, because of the feedback we received from developers. But I guess that just refers to the developer preview. I guess that actually makes sense. Yeah. I was thinking the way the quote was worded made it seem like we've received a lot of feedback, right, but we're going to listen to the feedback we receive from developers. But actually, I suppose it's just because it's a developer.
Well, it's a developer preview, so presumably if you're using it, you count as a developer. In this case, they might say, we've received a lot of feedback from you normies, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, actually here, I think I found it.
From consumers.
I mean, this is kind of insider baseball, what I'm about to say, but I think it's related. There's this guy who worked on the Windows team for years named Paul Donnelly, who ran the technical beta program. And his job was to get technical beta testers, make sure their feedback was incorporated into the products. He just left Microsoft maybe a month ago, just kind of left. And a lot of people who had been technical beta testers were like, okay, now what? Are they going to listen to us? Are they going to take our feedback anymore? Like he went to go work on Amazon, work at Amazon, I think on the Kindle Fire now. So it's like, okay, so are we taking beta tester feedback anymore? Like, do people who are more technical have any say in the product anymore?
I'm thinking Microsoft. It's a big company, more than a few people. That probably, if Mr. Ducky leaves, they just find somebody else to do it. They go, hey.
I don't think so.
Joey, come here. Come here, Joey.
Yeah.
Ducky was sitting here. You sit here now. There isn't.
I could. There's a story to be told. I mean, that would probably only be interesting to some people, but that would include people listening to this podcast. Where, in the olden days, like the mid 1990s, to beta test a Microsoft product, the way you would interact with the team, if you will, and with the other beta testers was through CompuServe in the early days, and you actually had to pay to be on CompuServe, and so the level of feedback that you would get, the level of discourse, was very high because those people were paying to be there, and there wasn't the sort of trolling and stupidity that you see now, just like on Twitter or on the internet in general. And after, because that made it hard for some people to, provide feedback, they eventually switched to Usenet newsgroups. Microsoft has their moderated newsgroups that they use. You have to log in with an ID and so forth, and they do that. But I think the height of stupidity for the feedback process, before I think it all just fell apart, was actually probably during the Windows Millennium beta, where the beta coordinator for that went by, she didn't reveal her real name. She had a handle, and her name was Skeeter. And instead of saying, hi, my name is Amanda, whatever her name was.
I'm Skeeter.
She hid her identity.
Right.
And then she would just post stuff. A lot of it was absolutely incorrect. That was the point at which I had my deepest availability to internal Microsoft information. I actually saw the bug dashboard that they had for that Millennium product every single day. It was the same thing that she looked at, and I would write about it occasionally. And then she would contradict me publicly and say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's pulling this out of his ass.
Oh,
and I could see the exact thing that she was looking at. And that woman had absolutely no credibility at all. It was horrible. And now we've reached a kind of a new low in many ways, which is simply even in Millennium at least, people could provide feedback and you would get some kind of a response. And unfortunately, Windows 7 and now Windows 8, you get the feeling that these guys are doing the Apple thing where they're saying, look, here's the product. We do want you to hammer away at it. But what we want you to do is find bugs. We don't want you to tell us how to fix this thing or make it better or, change the features. They really don't want feedback like that. That's the impression that I get. And I think the sad part about it, well, just to finish the thought, is simply that they act like they want your feedback. I mean, they talk about how this thing is feedback driven. And I really, it's the one thing I just don't really see. I don't think it's I don't think it would be a problem for them to do the Apple thing if they didn't pretend that they weren't.
That's a really good point. I mean, I think they're emulating Apple. I also think they're doing, because of where these people came from who are working on Windows now, they're also doing what they've always done with Office, right? This is exactly how Microsoft has been building and testing and rolling out Office for the past several releases. I mean, you get...
Yeah.
Well, then it's no accident because Sinofsky came from Office, right?
That's very interesting. Right. Because I certainly never questioned it. I never read it about anyone else questioning it. Office was always different than Windows. It was the way it was, and I think we just sort of accepted it. I think the hard thing for Windows now is that there were enough of us who know how it used to be, and this comes down to that same conversation. Maybe we can agree that the Jim Alchin style full disclosure stuff is dangerous in its own right. But I feel like this is too much of the other extreme, and that maybe there's a happy middle ground, that they could somehow chart, but they're just not, they're not doing it. And I don't know. It's kind of it's tough. It's tough because I've just witnessed so much of it, and I really just feel like they've gone too far in this direction in some ways.
I wonder if it's the what's happened is the change has gone from a beta release is about gathering feedback and finding bugs to a beta release is about promoting a product. It's about building interest, because that seems like what it is now, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a marketing thing.
Sure.
Here's the consumer preview.
Windows is tough though, because Windows Office is a product, as a set of applications or whatever. I mean, Windows is like the whole infrastructure. It's everything, and I think that maybe that ties into it, and maybe that's part of the reason why doing exactly the same thing they did on Office was okay over there, but it's maybe not.
You can't
okay
really do it. Yeah.
And I mean, one thing they did though last time with Windows 7, although this wasn't widely publicized, they had this group of like elite testers. They called the test pilots. So there were I forget how many there were, maybe like 50 or so people who they actually did listen to when they gave feedback. They were actually people who, when they said, okay, this is broken, or you guys absolutely have to fix this, they seemed to actually give that some weight. And now they don't have this, as far as I can tell, for Windows 8, or if they have it, they're very, very underground. So it makes you kind of wonder, like, why did they do away with that program?
Too much feedback.
Well, and I also wonder if it impacts the reliability and design of the software. Do they not need beta testers for feedback and bug fixes? Maybe they don't. Maybe I'm sure they release it to corporate, beta. I mean, they release it to qualified beta testers in some sort of private, quiet way, I'm sure. Yeah. So I mean,
they're making little tweaks. They are making little tweaks. So we shouldn't just say they're making none. I mean, when people have been screaming on the building Windows 8 blog about the UI, they did change how you pan with the mouse, and you can do something a little differently than you did with the developer preview. But it's not a giant tweak. Like, people are saying, we want you, like a lot of people are saying, Microsoft, we want you to make the Metro interface something you can turn off. Yeah. And they're just like, nope,
Metro apps available on the desktop.
Right. Yeah. Not doing that. Sorry.
That's cute. The problem, I'm sure it's tough because everyone has different ideas about the way it should be, and you're never going to be able to please anyone. Microsoft, to be fair, is in an awful position. They're never going to do everything right for everybody. It's just the nature of the beast, and everyone's going to complain about something. So you can't listen to all the feedback, obviously, or I should say, you can't act on all the feedback. But I don't know. It just feels like there isn't. I guess we'll see. The beta is not out, or the consumer preview, or whatever we're calling it these days, and maybe we'll look at that and say, look, they really did listen.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
Probably not. But, hope springs eternal.
Hey, but we're listening. We're listening to Windows Weekly. That's what we're listening to with Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley. We're going to take a break, come back, and talk about the hardware requirements for Windows 8. Wouldn't you like to know what those are?
I would like to know.
Wouldn't you like to know? Well, sorry, don't have that information, but we'll talk about it anyway. That's coming up in just a moment, but first a word from Hover.com. A lot of people have been paying attention. Yesterday, we went black and white because, and that's why, by the way, some of the reruns you're going to see are in black and white, as a protest to these bills in the House and Senate, PIPA and SOPA, respectively, or SOPA and PIPA, respectively. And One of the the backlashes that people had, consumer backlashes, was against companies that had initially expressed support for those bills. And one of the companies that was going to benefit from those bills was a well-known domain registrar, which shall remain nameless on this show. And they were all in favor of. They changed it once they realized it was a black eye politically, but they were all in favor of it because they were going to get all the blocked domains. We're going to get referrals back to their registry. Maybe they make a little money on that. This is why I think a lot of people fled that well-known, I'll say it, GoDaddy, to other registrars. And when people asked me, I always told them hover.com. That's who we have moved most of our domains, the ones that aren't locked, to hover.com. And I want you encouraged you to do the same. If you go to windows.hover.com, you can see how very different it is from the experience you might have been used to from other registries. First of all, no big upsell, not lots of clicks, buttons. You have to press things you have to buy. All you have to do is put in a domain name that you're looking for. And they've got they've got some interesting features on here that do not slow you down. For instance, they have, you'll notice, in fact, I'll do this right now. If you go to windows.hover.com, you'll notice that, and enter a name. Let's say crazypants.com, because my wife has a plan to sell crazy pants. And I swear to God, actually, it was something else. It was
it makes sense to me.
Tunic Time, I think, was what she wanted to do. Tunics, tunictime.com. So I went to the. This was at a meal. She said this. She said, "Register it now." I said, "Well, we're at dinner." She said, "Register." So I went. I went to hover.com on my smartphone, and I looked for tunictime.com, and lo and behold, Tunic Time was not available. But they showed me a number of related names with little gold stars next to them. Those are sites that are owned, like Tunic Tees. Somebody owns it and has set a price for it. So these are premium domain names. I could get tunictime.ca. That would be cool. Or tunictime.net. Tunictime.me. $10. Good deal. But if you see a domain name you like and somebody already owns it, this is a nice little system. They flagged it as a premium domain that Hover can sell you, and they set the price right there. Now, this one is $1,700. Others could be more or less, depending on what the person's looking for. You can also, and I love this, if you upgrade to a premium domain, trade in the domains you don't use, you never use, like for me, tunictime.com, and Hover will refund all the money you've spent at Hover for it, including the registration and the renewal fees. So that is a good deal. That is a good deal. Hover doesn't sell a lot of services. It's very simple. They focus on making it easy to register and manage domains and email. Very useful, by the way, if you don't have a personalized email address, go to windows.hover.com, get that personalized email address, and then have them forward it to your Gmail or Hotmail, whatever you use. And you never again have to give out the Gmail or Hotmail. You can use that personalized address. It's much more professional. And if you decide to change providers, you change, but you just tell Hover, forward it to the new one. It's fantastic. Try a search on Hover today. See what premium domain names are available. By the way, if you're moving to Hover, they have a special concierge service. They'll do all the moving for you. I wish I had done this. You call the number that you see on the Hover page and say, I want that concierge service, and I heard it on TWiT. And I think they'll still do this. They don't advertise it anymore, but I think they'll still do this. They'll move you for free. And by the way, $10 if you're moving a domain, $10, and what you get is another year on that domain. So it's a great deal. If you need a non-premium domain name, just use the offer code SHOWCODE. Wait a minute, that's not the offer code. Windows SHOWCODE. That's like a placeholder, right? Don't use SHOWCODE. Use Windows. This is the show Windows. SHOWCODE. It should have a little %SHOWCODE%, and I would know it was a placeholder. Use Windows and you'll get 10% off. That discount does not apply to premium domains. And if you want to trade in a clunker, call customer service or email them at help@hover.com. By the way, one of the things I love about customer service at Hover is they have a no-hold policy. If you call them during business hours, once you get a representative, they will handle your question, your comment, your suggestion, your complaint without putting you on hold. I love that. They stay on the line until everything's fine. Hey, I just made that up. They stay on the line till everything's
That's why you're
fine.
the best color man in the business.
Hover, windows.hover.com. Use the offer code SHOWCODE. No, Windows. And you'll save 10%. Paul Thurrott, Mary Jo Foley. What do we know about hardware? Well, I know one thing that they've said. I know. See, I read. They said that if it runs Windows 7, Windows 8 will run even better on it, right?
Sure.
Unless it's an ARM processor.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of a wild card.
And then you don't know what the hell is going to happen.
No, we don't.
So what have they said? They are talking about ARM, these tablets, right?
Yeah.
Were you disappointed? You were so smart not to go to CES, by the way, both of you guys, because there was really nothing. There was the beautiful Lumia 900, which I'm very excited about, and I will immediately get in line to buy the minute. I think in March we can get it. But were you surprised that how there was no Windows 8 stuff at all? There was Ballmer talked about stuff you'd already heard, and then you go to the show floor, and we had to look really hard. We found that tablet I showed you, the Koopa tablet. It was like the only tablet I could find running Windows 8, and that was just because they put the developer preview on it.
Right. Well, I think that was Microsoft doing that on purpose. They have their own schedule. They'll talk this stuff up when they want to.
But we do know that there will be ARM-based tablets running Windows 8.
Yes.
Yes.
And so apparently back in December, Microsoft released a set of documents related to the hardware, or I'm sorry, I should say for the logo certification requirements, right? If you want to sell Windows devices, whether they're ARM devices or PCs, and you want that logo on there, they have to meet certain qualifications. And Raphael discovered this and pointed out some of the more interesting bits that he found already in his Within Windows blog. So some of the cooler stuff involves the screen digitizers on a touch screen have to have 5 touch points at least.
iPad has 10, which I learned. I didn't know, but I learned.
Yeah, and for example, that Lenovo Yoga Flip has 10.
10.
Has 10.
Yep.
HP Touch Smarts have like 2. So
not going to make it. Not going to happen.
In the same way that Windows Phone devices have a set of required hardware buttons, the home, the search, back, and so forth, Windows tablets and convertible PCs have to have certain buttons, including power, rotation lock, a Windows key button, which is an interesting name, and volume up and down. And they're going to, you have to support Control-Alt-Delete by Windows key plus the power button. So holding those 2 buttons simultaneously will emulate that Control-Alt-Delete, keyboard shortcut, which is kind of cool. So there's some interesting stuff around there. There are some requirements on Intel x86 type computers that will not be required of ARM. And Raphael speculated, and I also believe this to be true, that it's simply because Microsoft doesn't yet have the same experience with the ARM hardware as they do with x86, and they really can't guarantee that level of performance. So one of them happens to be 2-second resume. So if the computer's in sleep state and you tap a key or you hit one of the buttons to bring it back, if it's an Intel-based system, an x86, x64 computer, it has to come back awake within 2 seconds, which is true of most computers today when it's just sleeping, not hibernation, but actual sleep. But on an ARM chip, they're not going to enforce that. And I think it's just because they can't yet. I don't think it's because those things will have bad performance. I just don't think they have the metrics, or the matrix yet of, I'm sorry, the metrics.
You're thinking the Matrix, aren't you?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I don't know what I mean. I'm just talking. Don't stop me. I'm on a roll now.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. So it's just stuff like that. It's some very interesting things. There are actually 3 of these documents, and they're very lengthy and they're very dense, but it's an interesting peek behind what they're requiring of these device makers. The really weird thing about this is it's sort of like that consumer preview thing where the reason we found out about this is because everyone else had latched onto this side story that has to do with Microsoft supposedly locking Linux out of these ARM-based devices. Now, you would know this better than me, but I could be wrong, but I don't believe that when the iPad shipped that there was any huge uproar over the fact that
we can't
Apple
boot
was
Linux.
locking out Linux on this. No, seriously.
No,
right?
you're right.
I mean, that's how this story was sort of contorted. That's what caused him to look at these documents. And when he did, he was like, what the hell? There's all this great information here. Why are people talking about Linux? You know?
Yeah, it definitely, that's what set everybody off. I mean, especially over on NCD Net, it became like this huge battle between our Linux blogger and our one of our Microsoft bloggers. It's like, secure boot cannot be disabled on ARM tablets. Okay, call in the DOJ, call in antitrust lawyers. This is horrible. And then you're like, well, who will want to do this on a tablet?
Exactly. Aside from that,
I mean, a couple of people have said, you can disable it on a laptop, on an x86-based laptop. You can have that disabled. And so people are now saying, so when there's ARM laptops, you can be able to disable it on that? Okay, there are no ARM laptops yet, but when there are, perhaps you will be able to, and perhaps you will not.
Soft. I mean, the internet, aside from there's a sort of a pedantic quality to the internet that I always find amusing and disturbing. But then there's the inability of anyone to focus on what's actually important, And this is what this is. It's just a beautiful example of it. It's absolutely ludicrous.
But you know what is crazier? I actually think this could pose a problem for Microsoft. I agree with you that it's a pretty extreme edge case, but I think somebody is going to try to stir up some antitrust action around this. I just have a weird feeling this could happen.
Well, I'll tell you what. Okay, I'll tell you why. And I thank the chat room for pointing this out. It isn't Microsoft selling the hardware, so they're dictating to a Lenovo or whoever that you cannot sell this hardware with anything but Windows 8 on it.
Actually, that's not what they're dictating. They're dictating that if you want the logo,
right,
that you have to adhere to these requirements.
Right.
Remember, no one is forcing Dell to sell these devices. That's their choice. I mean, the other thing is, and honestly, I think Microsoft should be applauded for this, and especially so if they do it the right way. They're trying to turn Windows PCs into Windows devices. They're trying to make them more reliable and more appliance-like. So I think we're always going to have these kind of, the truck PCs that Steve Jobs talks about, and then we're going to have these cars, these devices, these self-contained units. That's what those things are. They're meant, hopefully, will not have the desktop and do all that stuff we've already talked about. Hopefully, it will be more like an iPad type experience. Again, no one complained about the iPad. No one.
But Apple sells hardware and software, so that's a little different. It's not like Apple said to third-party hardware manufacturers, thou mayst not put anything else on it.
Well, third-party hardware manufacturers are free to sell an identical
without a
device
certification.
Running Linux.
Right.
Linux,
but somebody did actually hack the iPad to run Linux.
Oh yeah, I mean,
somebody sent me a link to
every
that.
device will eventually be hacked to run Linux. I wouldn't even be surprised if these Windows 8 tablets are. This happens in the cell phone universe. People don't complain about iPhones being bootloader locked, but every Android phone, when it comes out, they check, is it bootloader locked? Because we'd like to, it's already running Linux, but we'd like to run our own firmware on it. So I don't think it's, I see what you're saying, Paul. And really, if people just say, hey, this is a Windows 8 tablet, period. And if the hardware manufacturer wants to sell a Linux installable version, they can.
Sure.
I think that's fair. I don't think that's unfair.
Nope. I don't either. I think,
neither of us do either, obviously.
Yeah.
It would be
but there are a lot of
Dell
people
or
who
HP
do.
or whoever. They could certainly do that.
Yeah, there are people out there, I've heard from them, I'm sure Paul has too, who think it's a big imposition for whatever their reasons are.
Let's hear it from the crazies.
Well, let's see. I mean, if Lenovo or somebody says, we're going to sell two versions. Here's the Windows 8 certified version that can only run Windows 8, and we're going to sell exactly the same ARM-based hardware without an operating system, so if you want to hack it. If they do that, the problem is they probably won't do that, right? Because it's a teeny-weeny market.
Because no one is actually asking for that, right, in any appreciable way.
Right.
So that's why these. I mean, look, I have sympathy for the other side as well. They want to, let's say, they want to buy this cool hardware and they can't put Linux on it. That's frustrating.
Is it though?
Well, for might be five people.
It might. All I'm saying is this thing is 6 months or more from coming out. When Apple announced the iPad, when Apple announced the iPad, I didn't sit there and think, I'd really like to install some other operating system on this. I wonder if I could contact a legal entity of some kind and complain about that. That's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, on the other side, and this is DMAC in the chat room, it's like saying you can't customize your car. This is the kind of car it is. Maybe you should say
you can, but you'll void your warranty.
Well, can you on the Windows 8 tablet? Can you do anything besides run?
Someone will break into these things, like you said, and do this.
Yeah.
This will just like people today are releasing jailbreaking tools for the iPhone 5, for whatever the operating system is, iOS 5, and all that stuff. I mean, they'll still do it.
It's pretty hard to prevent it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and frankly, that level of work is all that's required to serve the number of people that want it to be done anyway.
Microsoft's raising the price on Windows Phone 7.5. According to this article from Mary Jo Foley, apparently.
Oh, well, sorry. I probably made this really confusing.
It says Windows Phone OS is going to go up $8 a copy if you're a handset manufacturer.
Sorry, I wrote that so badly in the show notes. What it actually should say is, so we didn't know until this week how much Microsoft was charging handset makers per copy of the Windows Phone OS. So the Chinese phone maker ZTE came out and said to trustedreviews.com, hey, we're paying between $23 and $31 per copy.
It's not going from
time,
23 to 31. That's how much roughly they're paying.
That's how much they're paying.
That's actually
per
a
copy
lot.
to Microsoft.
That's comparable to what you pay for
people are saying.
Windows, isn't it? On a PC.
Range. What's with the range?
I know. I
Is that
think
based
the
on how many
range
they
might
sell,
be.
or?
I think the range might be either how many they sell, or Microsoft does this with Windows too. They have these marketing arrangements where if you do certain things, you promote it a certain way, you agree to certain promotional terms, then they give you a cheaper price.
That kind of thing.
Exactly.
That does seem like a lot. I don't know. I mean, Android's free. So
sort of.
I think it's free, isn't it?
Except you have to pay Microsoft.
You have to pay Microsoft $5 for the
royalties. Yeah,
that's a good point.
You have
Also
to pay your,
goes for $23 to $31.
yeah, exactly.
An iPhone you can't count because Apple's the only manufacturer. So, but it does seem like that's a lot for an operating system for a phone. It seems like, I don't remember what the numbers were for a Windows PC, but isn't it roughly in that ballpark, around $25 a copy?
I've heard numbers all over the map for how much it costs.
And again, because depending on the marketing co-op and all that other stuff,
exactly. But yeah, a lot of people when this story hit today said, wow, I can't believe they're charging that much. Like, it's going to be prohibitive for more people building Windows phones. And the question is, does Microsoft care? Because when they first started Windows Phone, they really tried to keep it a small pool of handset makers to try to stop what happened with Windows Mobile, which was just everybody doing whatever they wanted. So, maybe they don't care. But I think they should care because they need more partners, not fewer, to get some leverage in market share here.
Well, furthermore, the growth area is in emerging nations where you've got to keep the prices really down on these things.
Yeah, the quality over quantity thing isn't really working out for them.
Well, maybe they want to be. Well, I don't know. I mean, you could do that by having a certification process. I mean, you don't have. It's not like Android where they give it to anybody who wants. You could say, and I'm sure Microsoft does. No, ZTE, we don't think you're appropriate, or whoever. We don't think you're appropriate for a Windows phone. Yep. So.
Has anyone complained that we cannot install Linux on a Windows phone yet?
Not yet. I don't know.
Maybe after the show they will.
Wait till I tell you what. Wait till the Lumia 900 comes out. You might hear that because
So it's like I bought this toaster and I can't put a microwave in it. What's up with that?
Why not? Why not? What? Dave Cutler is working on the Xbox? That can't be. Am I misreading that one too?
No, how crazy is that one, right?
Didn't he was the original NT developer guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dave Cutler, for anybody who possibly could be listening to Windows Weekly and not know who this guy is, he's the guy who wrote Windows NT, also the guy who wrote VMS when he was at Digital way back when. So yeah, he then about 4 years ago started working on Windows Azure. He was the first hire on the Red Dog team that built Windows Azure. And then I have been hearing recently, like, Cutler's not on Azure anymore. And so I was trying to find out, where is he? Did he leave the company? And it turns out he went to work on the Xbox team, which is just kind of crazy. It just set off like a million possible, what's he doing? Are they changing the operating system of the Xbox? Is the Xbox going to be ARM-based? All these kinds of things are now like out there, wild speculation. I'm dying to hear what Paul thinks. Like, what? I mean, I know you love the Xbox.
Well, and I love David Cutler. I can tell you just a couple of notes on Dave Cutler. Of course, He is the subject of that book, Showstopper, which is absolutely fantastic. Z Pascal, or Z Zachary Pascal is his name.
Yeah. Best Microsoft book ever.
F. Zachary Pascal.
Yeah, great
Best
book.
Microsoft book ever.
It
if you
is.
only read one book about Microsoft, read that book.
Years ago,
Yes.
I wanted to meet David Cutler. I've tried a couple of times. The first time, at the event that caused me to start the SuperSite for Windows, I was talking to Yusuf Mehdi, who at the time was on the Windows NT team, and I asked him what Dave Cutler was up to. And he said that Dave Cutler was doing research stuff related to 64-bit computing. And at the time, that was Digital Alpha. And then he was the guy who convinced Microsoft to back AMD's what became the x64 instruction set, which Intel later adopted and is now the basis for all mainstream computers in the world. It was kind of a hokey scheme compared to the Itanium stuff and all that other stuff, but he felt that this was the future and it was the right way to go, and the whole planet has gone in this direction. So he did NT. He basically was responsible for x64 as far as I'm concerned. And now he's on the Xbox. Very, very interesting. I later was able to meet some of the guys he worked with, David Thompson and Mark Lakowski, who's the guy responsible for the NTFS file system, by the way. Now works for Google. Still haven't met Dave Cutler, but he's the guy. You know, people talk about guys like Bill Gates and all that stuff. I don't care about Bill Gates. I care about Dave Cutler a lot. This guy is very, very interesting.
Wistful in our chat room says Dave Cutler working on Xbox is like Stephen Hawking working on microwave popcorn.
Well,
is this beneath? By the way, hey, as long as I've interrupted you, I want to say I got it completely wrong. It's G. Pascal Zachary who wrote Showstopper.
Okay,
I should know. I mean, he's been on TWiT before. I'm just an idiot.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like Paul. I've tried to meet him too. I've asked. He's one of the. He is probably one of the only, if not the only person at Microsoft I've tried to meet and been told never, ever, ever.
Yeah.
Like, you will never.
What do you think? Does he have a wart?
No.
If you read Showstopper, you'll know why he doesn't do press interviews anymore.
You could probably get a lot out of him.
He's an honest man. See, that's you don't want that. No.
Remember that we've talked a lot about computing is changing. Mainstream computing 5-10 years ago was PCs, laptops and desktop computers. The mainstream computing that we're going to be doing in the future is all these other devices. It's going to be smartphones and tablets. It's going to be these convertible things that do different stuff. And it's going to be stuff in the living room. And my understanding of what he's doing on the Xbox, which is based on what Mary Jo wrote, is that he's working on what is essentially sort of the non-gaming stuff, right? The notion of the Xbox as a set-top box for the living room. Based on his kind of capabilities and his reputation, I would say that he's probably working on performance tuning and all of that very important low-level work. And regardless of what the architecture is of that machine, I could almost picture them going with some kind of a PowerPC derivative simply for backwards compatibility so that it could run Xbox 360 games, which may or may not be a big deal. It certainly was with the previous console.
What if he's putting Refus on it?
Are you eating a pizza?
Yes, I am.
Oh my God.
I'm binging, basically.
He's getting his last carb.
Last
thrills.
carb.
He's got like a bottle of champagne and a pizza.
No,
It's
actually,
like my last day on Earth.
you unfortunately, and you know this, Paul, from doing this show for many years now. Thursday is company lunch day.
Yeah.
As it was at the TWiT Cottage, so it shall be at the TWiT Brick House, and today it's pizza. So I just ran out and got a slice. I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Continue on. Soldier on.
The other guy who went over with Cutler around the same time, I believe, and this is interesting too, is a guy named Hoy Vo, who he's not as famous as Dave Cutler, but at Microsoft, he is like one of the foremost experts on hypervisors and virtualization. He also now is on the Xbox team, which really makes you go, what? Okay, what are they
up to?
I mean, they're bringing all these people. I mean, Don Box works over there too, the guy who helped create SOAP. I mean, they're assembling this kind of dream team of like really famous Microsoft veterans, all working in the interactive entertainment business, doing something related to Xbox. So it really makes you go, okay, what? I don't know what they're doing, but
that's
something
really
big.
Interesting.
Yep.
I like it. I mean, that's an X-Files. There's something going on there.
Yeah, right. They're taking this seriously. not just for video games. I mean, it seems like a much bigger deal all of a sudden as a result.
Yes.
Speculation.
Although
what they might be up to?
there's an interesting. I found this post today. This is really interesting. I've talked about this guy on the show before. His name is I'm going to forget now, but Hal Berenson. Hal Berenson used to work at Microsoft as a distinguished engineer, and he wrote a post right after my post about Cutler saying, "Here's why I think everybody's going to Xbox land." And his theory is Microsoft is flattening the corporate hierarchical organization. As he calls it, they're Sinofskying Microsoft. And so people who are at a higher level, partners, architects, they need to kind of hide. Go find somewhere and hide. And his theory is they're all hiding in Xbox because that's outside of where Sinofskyization can reach inside of Microsoft.
God.
Now, I don't know.
That's terrible.
I don't know if that's true. No idea. But it was an interesting side theory. So there you have it. That's just one guy's theory.
That's the most negative possible interpretation.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
It is.
They're all hiding.
I'm glad I brought it to the show.
What if, and somebody in the chat room, again, chat room's so smart, what if he said 2 words, 1 2-word word, on live? What if they're looking at making, you know what on live is? That's that gaming service that you don't actually run the hardware. It's all run on the server, and then they download the rendered images to you. What if Microsoft's thinking about something like that? Hypervisor might make sense there, some heavy-duty server experience.
Microsoft already has a lot of stuff like that.
True.
So it wouldn't be far-fetched for them to be remoting or virtualizing different environments and so forth. It might be as simple as we're going with a new architecture, but we need to run the Xbox 360 in a virtual machine so that old software runs on the box.
Ooh, it could be for the 720.
Yeah, we're not calling it the 720.
All right. The 420?
But whatever it's called. So I don't know. We can only speculate. I mean, we can only speculate. These are some heavy hitters, though. I mean, that's very, very interesting. A guy, Dave Cutler's been around forever.
And all these guys were still at Microsoft. They just came from other areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was Cutler doing until now?
The past 4 years, he was working on Windows Azure. He helped develop Microsoft's cloud platform. He built that basically with his team. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been kind of since NT, he built NT, and then he kind of went to the background. And he's been always been working on kind of the deep architectural stuff for the next generation, which is what makes his movement to Xbox amazing.
Both these,
very interesting.
And Hoivo was also at Red Dog, was also at Azure.
He was.
Yeah.
Yes. And before that was working on Windows also at like a very deep architectural level. He worked like on programming models for Windows. So these guys are heavy
really
hitters as far as architecture. Yeah.
Wow. This great criminology. I mean, you got to, figure out, look at the picture on the podium and see who's where.
Yep.
Now, another move, cross town. Move. I'm not going to say this guy's name because it looks like it's Vegty.
Yeah, it's Vecti, right?
Vecti.
Vecti.
Bill Vecti.
He is, an interesting book would be stories by ex-Microsofties.
Yeah.
Right.
Where are they now?
Yeah. And let's talk about the old days. I think there'd be some interesting stories there. I'm sorry, Bill Vecti's got lots of interesting stories.
What was he?
What
did he do at Microsoft?
He was on the server team. Wasn't he last we saw him?
Yep.
Yes.
I've been at Microsoft since 1990.
Wow.
Early days, Windows and Office as a product manager. Yep. And then stayed around for a long time and did a lot of, he rose through the ranks. I mean, he went way high up in the ranks at Microsoft on the server side.
Something that happened with those guys a couple of years ago. Obviously Muglia's gone, and there was an interesting overturn there, but and maybe he left. I think he might have left as part of that, right? Same time frame as Muglia, right in there.
Yeah, he left. I'm looking that up too here. Yep, and that's when he left Microsoft.
Yeah. So he's been at HP, and he was working on. Well, he was the. I guess he was the. He was a executive. I almost said vice principal. I've been dealing with my children a lot lately. Vice president of software, meaning he did a lot of stuff around WebOS, and he is now. I guess he's retaining that title, but he's also the chief strategy officer, and he's going to be leading HP's WebOS open source initiative, which is really, really interesting. So he is running an operating system, essentially, which you have to think is what he was being brought up to do with Microsoft, and then it never happened.
But, I mean, come on, how much of a commitment is HP making to open source WebOS? This might be an office of one.
Yes, but I actually would argue that by putting him in charge, the reason this is interesting is because of who he is.
Right.
In other words, they could have put some guy off the street in charge of WebOS, and that would have said everything you needed to know about it.
Right, that's true.
But I actually think the fact that they put Bill and Vecti in charge of it suggests that they might be a little more serious about this than we previously believed.
What would be their percentage? That means, of course, that they would keep putting WebOS on some HP hardware.
I think, HP uncharacteristically for that one weird year kind of talked about how they were going to dual boot with Windows with this thing. It was going to be on all of their devices. They were going to put it in their printers. It was going to be in this and that. And then, obviously, that fell apart. But I have to think that there's a part of that company still that believes that there's some future to be had there. And certainly the technical excellence of WebOS really shouldn't be debated. There may be a hope that there's something that could still come of this. And by open sourcing this, it's possible that other OEMs will pick it up, make their improvements. They'll tie that stuff, their improvements will go back into the code, and that over time, this thing could mature and become something that they can still use in a more meaningful way. And that maybe that vision they had in the past is something that could still happen, even if it happens on a much slower time schedule maybe than they originally thought was going to be possible. I'm just saying that this is interesting to me because of who he is. And I would have honestly, I thought they basically flushed WebOS down a toilet, but this suggests otherwise. And I'm very interested that he's
Maybe we'll see a dual boot of WebOS and Windows 8 on an ARM tablet, Paul.
Over my dead body.
No.
But it just shows that Meg Whitman has a completely different game plan than Leo Apotheker did. I mean, this is like...
Well, he was all about cutting and dicing.
I don't know what he was all about.
Disaster.
It's a complete shift. It's very interesting. And I guess you're right. I mean, based on Vecti's reputation and his status, he was executive VP of software. This means that they're prioritizing WebOS for something. Yep. Should I not say the word Zune anymore?
It's okay to say.
It's not the first time you've written Zune, R-I-P, in the show notes.
It won't be the last, Leo. It's something I'll just regurgitate that.
I'm not dead yet.
I revealed on this podcast, I think originally that Microsoft was abandoning the Zune brand, and obviously this is something you do in kind of measured steps. And people like to point out every time anything Zune related happens, oh, it's not dead yet, I guess.
Right.
But it's dead. And they're
it's dead.
It's dead. I mean, as far as the devices go, they released the Zune HD, I think it was in 2009, and that team was disbanded immediately. There were never plans for a follow-up to that. It was over the second it came out. We just didn't know about it until later.
Right.
The Zune organization used to be humongous. I've talked about this incredible warehouse-sized, stealth bomber hangar thing they were in with thousands and thousands of employees. Got completely gone. But there's a job posting that somebody pointed out to me, I think via email, that talks about something called Xbox Live Music. And it obviously, if you were just to replace the words Xbox Live with Zune, it sounds exactly like what they have now. Yeah. So that
Xbox
suggests
wins.
to me, what's that?
Xbox wins.
Well, because that was the question. In other words, Microsoft is getting rid of Zune. Zune as a brand did not take off. I was just looking at all my old Zune stuff. I have every device they ever made. I went through all the software. I've always really liked the Zune stuff. There were some good ideas there. I felt like the Zune brand was actually a pretty good brand. I liked the logo. I just thought it was a good brand, but obviously I'm a team of one on that one. So the question has always been, if you're going to get rid of Zune, what do you do? You have this entertainment stuff. You have to brand it something. So clearly, they're going with Xbox for their entertainment brand, not just video games, but overall entertainment.
And it's a good brand. I think that makes sense.
It's a popular brand, and of course, they're expanding the console to do all this TV and entertainment services stuff. Talked about Dave Cutler doing work on this next version of the console that may not, that may have nothing to do with gaming whatsoever. So clearly, pretty clearly, I would say Xbox.
I wonder. because of Xbox Live Music. And remember at CES, a few of the screenshots that people had of the Windows 8 build they showed, they had a little icon on some of them that said music, Microsoft Music. Mm-hmm. I wonder if this is that.
There was also an Xbox Live logo, title on that screen, if I'm not mistaken, in the CES
I think
keynote.
there was. Yep.
Yeah, so that's not a huge surprise. You know, they had a service that has gone by a few different names, but it was sort of like Games for Windows Live, I think was the name. Essentially a version of the Xbox Live services and all those capabilities for Windows. And I think I actually think they've already announced that they've just going to use Xbox Live for that. And so I think everything is coalescing around that one brand. And I think this is just another indication of that. So it makes sense.
One more story, and then we'll get to our tips and picks of the week. Do you want to do? I think we might have time for a few questions from the chat room, if you'd like. All right.
Sure.
So we'll start queuing those up. You mentioned the earnings call is later today. Any thoughts about what should we be looking for instance?
See if we have enough lifeboats to get everyone out of there. No. Well, I mean, obviously, the story is going to be everyone's going to look at Windows and how Windows does. Right. You know, remember, Mary Jo, at the keynote, they provided a figure. I think it was 300 million of Windows 7 sales. I think that was the figure.
I think it was 500 million. Right?
500 million, whatever the number was. I'm terrible. I'm a creative person, not a math person. So, yeah.
Or a creative math person, as
I'm just bad at math, I think would be the simplest way to say that. I later did do the math, and you can tell I was very good with it because I remember it exactly. But I had talked about how earlier they had really maintained a trajectory of 20 million units per month, and whatever that number was, I did the math, and it was a little bit lower than 20 million. It was like 18 point something million per month. So I would expect, not for the first time, that these Windows numbers are going to be a little lower than everyone would be comfortable with. But I think it's important for people to remember that this is a company that generates like tremendous amounts of money. I think the average expected revenue is $20+ billion for the quarter. So it's not like the company's struggling. You know, it's not Yahoo or like RIM or something. I mean, clearly they have some work to do in some key areas, including mobile computing. But this is still a company that generates a ton of cash, just a ton of cash. And that's going to continue.
They warned a few days ago. They kind of put this out as just a general warning around Wall Street. Like, those floods that happened in Thailand last year. Yeah, that really did impact the PC market because of the components. And so I felt like they were kind of softening potential blows. Like, okay, if PC shipments are down, Windows shipments are going to be down because that's what's on PCs, right? So I think, too, Windows numbers are not going to be at the highest level ever, obviously. And so, they're going to play up Xbox, right? They're going to play up Connect sales. They're going to play up the momentum around Office 365. Basically everything they said at CES in the Ballmer keynote. I think you're going to hear it again.
Yeah, actually, that warning that you just mentioned was even worse in some ways, because Gartner had come out with an adjustment of their expectations for the PC sales of the fourth quarter. And they changed it to a 1.4% overall decline year over year. And Microsoft, not once, but twice, people from Microsoft said publicly, that estimate was a little low. It's going to be worse than that. And it's not completely unprecedented, but it is kind of unusual for them to do that. And they would only do that because they are going to release their earnings. And I think what their earnings are going to show as part of the numbers are that the demand for Windows-based PCs was, in fact, lower than those projections that what Gartner said they would be.
I also thought they were going to announce, there have been some rumors of layoffs at Microsoft coming up in the hundreds of people, mostly in the central marketing group there. And I thought they might announce those just before earnings, actually, because that would have raised the stock price, at least possibly would have raised the stock price, because a lot of Wall Street still wants Microsoft to cut more costs. So I was kind of thinking they might announce that yesterday or earlier this week, but so far I haven't heard anybody talking about layoffs. So it's not something I think they'll talk about on the earnings call, but it's something that they've kind of planted again out there as, yep, we're probably going to have some layoffs, guys. So we're still cutting costs. Don't worry. We're trying to be moderate in our spending. So don't ding us for that. So I think you'll hear that too.
We're going to take a break, take some questions from the audience, the chat room. If you're in the chat room, get in there and don't start asking questions yet, but I'll start queuing them up after the commercial. And then we've got your picks of the week, including a tip, a software pick, an enterprise pick, and a code name of the week. Oh, it's good to have you back. But first, actually, you never went anywhere. It's me that's back, right? First, let's talk a little bit about our friends at Ford. Gee, that's just a blank lower third, isn't it? Just imagine, if you will, that it says something about Ford's electric vehicles.
Well, it is Ford Blue, at least.
It is. It's the blue oval. You know, I had dinner with Alan Mulally, me and about 20 other tech journalists. It was really fun. And one of the journalists, maybe it was Brian Cooley, I think, from CNET, said, so are you ever, no, maybe, I don't remember who it was. Are you ever going to update the logo? And Alan Mulally, the CEO of Ford, was like aghast. He said, that's Henry Ford's handwriting. We are not going to update the logo. That's staying the way it is. What are you, crazy? No. He did mention, though, the term, which they use all the time at Ford, polishing the blue oval. Because a lot of what Ford is about is taking the ideas and the vision of Henry Ford and his family and keeping it going in the 21st century, which, as you might imagine, is a challenging prospect. We talked a little bit about the fact that all the oil reserves that are going to be found have probably been found. The cost of gas is only going to go up. And Ford's answer is to lead the way in electric vehicle technology with both hybrids, and this is the one I'm excited about, plug-in hybrids. Now, they've got their first all-electric vehicle is available this year, the 2012 Ford Focus, taking reservations now. In the fall of 2013, the C-Max Energy plug-in hybrid will come out. They also showed their new 2013 Fusion, which will offer a plug-in engine. In fact, Ford's redesigning its production lines to make sure that all of their cars can offer these choices as demand indicates. So this is pretty exciting. The plug-in hybrid, I think, is very interesting. The idea, and they're saying 100 miles per gallon. It really could be unlimited because what you do is you plug it in and you charge it, and it uses the electric motor for the first 15 miles. So if you're just putting around town, you never use any gas. But if you need to go farther, they've got a gas tank, and they can go farther. All the electric and hybrid electric and the plug-in hybrids have regenerative braking. That means instead of the kinetic energy from the brakes being lost to heat, they go right back in to charge the battery, which is very cool. And they're really tying this in. Now you see the whole idea of My Ford Touch and Ford Sync. They're really tying this in to the smart apps and the smart electronics in the car. You'll have an iPhone or an Android or a Windows Phone app that will tell you how the battery's doing. The GPS will tell you the most eco-friendly driving route to save gas or power. You'll be able to remotely control vehicle charge and preconditioning settings. They even have software that will charge at the lowest utility rates possible automatically. If you've got that 240-volt home charging station, the Leviton charging station, your Ford Focus Electric will fully charge in 3 to 4 hours. It's 100% electric, no emissions at all. No carbon monoxide, no carbon dioxide. Of course, the lithium-ion batteries in there. And their new technology allow a topping off without reducing the life of the battery. I just think they're really doing all sorts of great stuff. This website is Ford.com/technology. Visit, you can find out more about all the technologies that are coming into the new Ford vehicles and why they're going to be great for you. All the technologies are available at Ford.com/technology, but you know the best thing to do, drive one at a Ford dealer near you. The 2012 Ford Focus Electric available for reservations now, and in the fall of 2013, it's the Ford C-Max Energy plug-in hybrids. Polish that blue oval. All right, back we go to work with Paul Thurrott, Mary Jo Foley, and questions from the chat room. I shall fire up the chat room. And now, folks, I shall fire the chat room. Will the Zune subscription service still be available for Windows Phone? They're just rebranding it, right, Paul? They're not changing the service.
I could only speculate. They've changed the service already, right? If you sign up for what's now called the Zune Music Pass, you don't get those 10 downloads every month, and the price is a little bit less. If I can't recall exactly how they changed it, but I'm not saying that's a step toward getting rid of it. But some of the things that make me nervous about the Zune Music Pass are that they never took any steps to bring this to other platforms. So obviously you can use it in Windows, you can use it on the web, you can use it with your Windows phone or a Zune device if you have one, but you can't use it on an iOS device, you can't use it on Android, and I don't believe you can use it on the Mac past the web client. So that's just suggesting that they're not hugely serious.
Although I was going to say you can kind of play around with it, because I actually got Zoom Pass to work on my Sony Walkman MP3 player.
Wow.
Like there's a way to do it, but it's not easy and not something you'd want to try to encourage, probably Microsoft, right?
Right. Well,
So, yeah.
of course, in that job posting we were just talking about was for something called Xbox Live Music. Now, that doesn't mean it's the subscription service. It could just be your standard
on your
a la
Xbox
carte,
Live, right.
purchasing. So, I don't know. I would. The one thing I've just said in the past with regards to Zune and them getting rid of the brand was it had nothing to do with the products and services, just about the brand. When I said Zune is going away, I meant the brand. Obviously, the devices are dead, the standalone devices, but I was referring specifically to the brand. The software still exists, the services still exist, and hopefully they will. I'm looking now at that job posting just to see if there's anything that suggests anything about a subscription, but there isn't. So I don't know.
Virgil wanted to know if Surface 2.0 was visible at CES. You guys weren't there, but is there anything new to say about the new Surface?
There is, in fact.
Mary Jo.
Surface 2, those smaller tables, as they're not the big-ass table anymore. Now they're the small-ass table. They are now shipping. They're shipping as of January 16th.
Is this the
January
Sur
16th.
40 or
And
whatever?
yeah, Sur 40, Samsung Sur 40, and they cost about $9,000 a piece, which is a lot cheaper than the Surface One. And I was at the National Retail Federation show in New York this week over at the Javits, and they had a display, and people were really all over it. I mean, I was surprised to see how many people were like, "Wow, that's super cool!" Like, not for their home, obviously.
No, it's,
maybe some
you see it in
wealthy people.
I have a question.
You see it in casinos, you see it in hotels. The cruise, the last
definitely.
cruise I was on, they had one in the bar, and it was very popular.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something about the Surface table. Can I put Linux on that thing? Or?
No, the bootloader is locked. I'm sorry.
You can dual boot WebOS. On
Can I do?
No, you
Yeah,
can't.
exactly.
You cannot. But what it is underneath actually is Windows 7 embedded inside the Surface table, and it's multi-touch, multi-user. It's actually pretty cool. And there were all kinds of retail applications they were showcasing with it. Like for cosmetic counters, and people who want to have different kind of retail things where you're interacting with customers over this table. It was very interesting. So they're out now. If you are interested in for your business or for whatever purpose, they're out, and you can get them from Samsung in 23 countries.
How will Jimmy wants to know how SkyDrive will be integrated into Windows 8? Do you expect to see any dramatic improvements in capabilities, new features, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we only know part of what's happening there, but part of it is going to involve this notion of data sync from the client to SkyDrive, which includes your settings and configuration and so forth. So there's going to be some aspect to that. What I'm hoping to see, in addition to that, is the thing we've been asking for so long, is just direct Explorer integration where you can do drag and drop copying between your local
That would be nice.
WinFS file shares or whatever you're using at home, and also SkyDrive. So hopefully we'll see something like that.
Ian wants to know, I think this is probably a Paul question, but I'll let either of you answer it, about availability of the Lumia 900 in other markets. Nokia announced that the 800, which they've been selling in Europe, will be available unlocked in U.S. markets at Microsoft stores. But what about the 900, which was built really, I think, for the U.S. market with a bigger screen, a front-facing camera?
So what they've said on the record is that it's exclusive to AT&T, but I have it's a single source, and so I want to be careful about not putting too much credence to this, although he's been very good about stuff lately, saying that AT&T's exclusive contract for this phone lasts 45 days from launch, and that after that time, well, It's not that long, but it kind of corresponds to the window of time that. Well, actually the window of time's a little longer, but the 710 is going to be available on T-Mobile for about 3 months before AT&T can get it. 45 days doesn't mark the time at which another carrier can sell it. It marks the time at which another carrier can negotiate to sell it.
Start talking about it. Okay.
Yeah. So supposedly there's an improved version of it coming that has a 12 megapixel camera. That's I don't know if it was coming to T-Mobile. I can't remember anymore. But my expectation would be that the 900 or something very much like it will appear on other carriers in the future, including internationally. But I don't actually know if that's the case. But that would be my guess, and based on what I heard, it makes sense.
What about Verizon?
What about Verizon?
I know.
Well, it's a GSM phone right now. They'd have to put a CDMA chip.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Verizon's going to get the Lumia 710.
710.
I know that
Right.
in April.
Yep.
Past the middle half of the year, I can't say, but I would. I think we talked about this last week or whenever that. The notion that maybe when the guy from Verizon was complaining about the lack of LTE on Windows Phone, what he was really complaining about was the lack of Windows Phone LTE on Verizon. That he knew at that time that Microsoft was going to launch on LTE with AT&T because they're some kind of special partner. We don't understand why or how that happened, but it did. And AT&T seems to get things first. So I bet that's what he was complaining about, and that we will see LTE phones on Verizon before the end of the year. But Verizon obviously has their own schedule going. There's something odd with Verizon that I can't quite understand.
There's something odd.
Well, there's
Verizon.
A weird relationship there, and I think maybe it does tie back to the AT&T thing. I think that by going with AT&T as a special partner, Microsoft might have harmed its relationship with Verizon. That's my theory, anyway.
Yeah, similar to Apple. Kind of.
Well, I don't. Remember, everyone else said no to Apple in the beginning, so I don't think anyone hated AT&T for that. It's just that AT&T by their exclusive contract with the iPhone surged to great success over that couple of years they had it exclusively in the United States. And I think that other carriers were eager to get the iPhone at that point. And maybe Verizon's just burned because it's like, guys, come on, they got the iPhone first. Now, what's going on here? Everyone gets Android phones. Why can't everyone get Windows phones? Part of it is probably just international. AT&T's the phones that run on AT&T are more, easier to bring to international markets because they use the same wireless networks and so forth. I'm sure there are reasons for it, but.
And finally, of course, we didn't mention it, but Apple had an event in New York City at the Guggenheim Museum announcing their educational plans with the iPad, announcing a special free tool, a Mac tool that allows you to develop textbooks for the iPad, a new iBooks 2 with a textbook bookstore, and partnerships with 3 of the biggest textbook manufacturers. Also a new iTunes U designed for K through 12 as well as universities to make it easier to put courseware up online. And Web9307 wanted to know if you thought Microsoft had similar plans in education, or
I have a lot of thoughts around this Apple thing. One of them is I look at that and I think, this is yet another way that Apple is differentiating what it does from these other guys. In fact, my tip of the week is related to this iTunes U stuff. But
okay. Well, it's true. I mean, it's a brilliant play to sell more iPads, basically, to march firmly into the textbook space, and all of this requires a Mac and an iPad.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying today on Twitter, one thing I know from experience is I've got these 2 little kids, and they come home with these backpacks that are like bigger and heavier than they are, full of books, and I think to myself, there's a lot more books occurring at a much younger age than was the case when I was a kid, and my God, like, what are they doing? It's true that carrying an iPad would be, or a laptop even, would be a million times better than carrying all these books,
right? From
the perspective of the kids. And the weight and whatnot. And I think there's something to be said about the interactive nature of some of these books. That's very interesting. On the other hand, I downloaded the free one, and I got to tell you, that thing takes forever to download.
It's huge.
Takes up a huge amount of space, and it's 17 pages long. It's not a textbook. It's a textbooklet.
They put a lot of video in it, and the EO will
so
see it,
Yeah. So you can only imagine what an actual textbook, like a real college textbook, converted into this kind of format would be. They'd be humongous. Okay, but whatever. You know, that's still okay, obviously. But no, I don't know of anything like this. I think Microsoft's attitude would be, we provide the plumbing. If Amazon wants to do something like that, it would run great on Windows 8 tablets and so forth. Obviously, the Apple stuff. Well, actually, obviously, the Apple stuff only runs on iOS right now. I've always been kind of curious that the iBookstore stuff was never ported to the Mac, at least, and then maybe even to the PC. But clearly, they're making the device play there, and maybe that makes more sense for that kind of thing.
I hope they've got something lined up, though, for Windows 8 tablets around this kind of an initiative. Some partner, somebody, or Microsoft doing some kind of a reader program, because didn't they just kill their own reader recently?
Yeah,
yeah.
but you know, we can't even get Audible on Windows Phone. So, you know, I just don't. This is just one of many things. I mean, you know, when you talk about kind of the safe platform, you know, for normal people or whatever, increasingly iOS is it, not because of the sheer availability of apps necessarily, but because of all this other stuff. There's a lot of neat stuff.
If you look at iPad and you look at, say, Kindle Fire, I mean, like, reading is like a key part of the experience. Buying books, reading, you know, and it's like, okay, what's Microsoft going to do around that with Windows 8? We have no idea at all, right? I mean, we don't even know anything.
This is part of that conversation about how things are changing. You know, in the past, if you were going to make an interactive anything, it was going to be like the CD-ROM that ran on Windows or something. That's how you would do that, and that's not how things are done now. And I think that, you know, this is one of those areas where they're losing out.
We're going to do our tips right now, and we'll start with our software. Well, I guess it's a tip of the week. Having to do with iTunes U.
Yeah, today's event reminded me. I've recommended this in the past in the podcast, but I just wanted to point it out again. iTunes released, or rather I should say, Apple has a service called iTunes U. And it's basically very similar to how podcasts work, in that there are audio and video versions of these things available, but the content is actual college classes, and some of them are from real
amazing,
you know, tier 1 schools, Stanford,
MIT, Yale,
Berkeley. Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the content's amazing, and if you're not taking advantages, you should. And if you don't like Apple's stuff, which is fine and understandable, they're just normal audio and video files. They'll actually play anywhere. I actually will sometimes download these things, and you can put them on another device. You can even change the metadata so it looks like a podcast to that device or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But you could do things, you know, it's like sitting in on a history class or a class about programming for iOS or whatever it is. There's all kinds of stuff. It's really, really neat. If you do like the iOS stuff, if you do have an iPad or an iPhone or whatever, they just released an app version of this. And this is for students and teachers to use this thing in a class where you can integrate with, you know, note-taking and class lectures and homework and all this other stuff. So a lot of really neat stuff going around this education initiative that Apple has. But just for everyone, as a Windows user, you can do this just with iTunes, which is how I use it. And I'll watch these things. I get up on the treadmill, or the elliptical rather, and you know, you can watch this on your iPad or whatever, on a Windows notebook or slate or whatever you have. You know, it doesn't really matter. It works through iTunes, and it's just a neat thing. It's free, and if you're not, you should at least look at it. I think you'd be shocked by how much stuff is there.
Shocked.
Yeah, it's really.
No, it is. In fact, when I found it, it was like it blew me away. And it's just the amount and the quality of the content.
I know, it's really amazing.
So one of the things Apple announced was that they, you know, this has been university focused. They're now going to support K through 12, which made me think. You know, I just was at our school board meeting, and one of the teachers presented a thing he did for calculus, a really great lesson plan for calculus, and I pulled him aside and said, this would be great. They put this on iTunes U, and they've got tools now for syllabus and testing and all of that stuff. And what a great way for teachers to share their courseware with other teachers, and for students to go and get a basically free education. Just fantastic. Software pick of the week. This is good. We saw this at CES.
Yeah, there are a lot of remote desktop solutions for devices. So if you have an Android device, an iPad, whatever it is, a phone, You can remote desktop into your own Windows environment at home or at work or whatever and get work done or check up on things or whatever it is you need to do. This past week, I think it was, or at CES rather, OnLive, the gaming company that you were talking about earlier, introduced a second product called OnLive Desktop. I think it's only on the iPad, but there's probably an Android version coming. But what this does is it takes the concept of remote desktop to kind of some interesting logical conclusion, which is you sign in with your user account, and then you get your own Windows desktop that's associated with it, as well as storage space for files and the ability to sync them back and forth to your computer.
And
so
Office.
It's right. Well, so as part of this environment, I don't know if you'll be able to see this if I hold it up, but this is
that's Word.
This is like Windows, yeah,
Microsoft Word running on an iPad.
And here's the kicker: this is free. This isn't the cheap, web-based version of Word. It's Word 2010. It's like the full version of Word, and that's interesting. That might be a game changer.
Yeah,
that's very, very interesting. So if you do have an iPad and you're interested in this kind of Windows interoperability stuff, you're going to want to look at this. This is free, by the way, free. That's amazing to me. And it has some cool stuff in it. It's Windows 7. Windows 7 has something called the Touch Pack. And so they've installed the Touch Pack, and you have that stuff available to you. So there's some cool, mostly little utilities and games and things. And, like the garden pond thing, where you can swirl your finger around the pond and it ripples the water and it moves the little paper boats around and that kind of stuff. But, more to the point, obviously, it has Office. And I think, the fact that, you're accessing a version of Windows for free, which is amazing in its own right. It already has applications installed, and they're truly useful. So Word and Excel and PowerPoint are in here as well. And you can get actual work done on this thing. It's very, very interesting. I'm not quite sure how they implement this, but what it looks like is one of those managed remote desktop type things where they're, obviously Windows is running on the server that they have. And it's the same technology that allows them to pump games down. I mean, how much easier must it be to transmit Windows to a device than a 3D game with hardware acceleration and all the crazy stuff that has to happen there? This is probably not impacting the servers in the slightest. It's probably just something they can do on the side. It's a neat thing to look at. Definitely check it out if you have an iPad.
You know what's interesting about that OnLive thing? When I saw that, I went to Microsoft and I said, "Is this legal? Like, can they do this?"
Yeah.
And they were researching it for a couple of days, and they came back and they said, "Ask them." And we have no comment. And
I asked them.
Yeah.
I asked Brian Jaquette.
Yeah.
They pay licenses for each and every copy.
They're a hoster, right? They're a hosting provider.
And if you're using Windows, they're paying a license fee for you. So obviously this will be a paid service at some point.
Right.
But I asked them that, and that's what
impressive.
They said. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is impressive.
And take advantage of it while it's free.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's pretty incredible. You have to sign up for a free account at onlive.com first, and then you can download the iPad software.
If you have one, by the way, and I found this out just by trying it, I have an OnLive account. I had it from the beta for the video game service. It's the same account, so you just log in with the account you already have.
Right.
Yep.
Really kind of stunning.
It really is. Yeah, it's nice.
But now it's time to talk enterprise with the enterprising Mary Jo Foley of allaboutmicrosoft.com.
So, of course, this week's enterprise pick of the week has to be System Center 2012, since Microsoft had a big announcement this week about how this is their key to the private cloud. And so System Center is the system management suite from Microsoft. There's 8 different products in it. And what's different about this version compared to previous versions is they announced this week that they're bundling all these products together into 2 SKUs. So you're not going to buy, we'll have to kind of manage through. Am I buying any of these 8, all of these 8? Which ones am I buying? They're going to give you a choice of buying the standard System Center 2012 SKU, which is for you if you don't do a lot of virtualization, or by the data center SKU, which is unlimited number of virtual machines supported, which is a really good deal if you do a lot of virtualization. They've integrated these. There's an integrated installer, although one of our listeners pointed out to me that, there is an integrated installer, sort of, but you still are actually installing this on 8 different servers. So it's going to be interesting to me to see if they get uptake on this new way of licensing this from smaller businesses, because they told me, Microsoft told me that 50% of all their customers currently buy all 8 products. And so it's not going to be a big deal for them. But that leaves the other 50% who don't need all 8 products, and so they're going to have to be actually buying them. You don't have to install them, but you're paying for them. So they're doing all kinds of things around software assurance and offering different kinds of deals to try to make it more appealing so that they can get customers of all sizes to try this out. The final version is probably going to be announced around April, I'm guessing, although they wouldn't say this week, because that's when they have their Microsoft Management Summit in Las Vegas. So if you're a System Center user, you can go kick the tires now, see what you think of the new SKUs and then pricing and all. And then around April, you'll probably be able to get the final bits.
Cool. And finally, our codename pick of the week.
Yes. So codename pick of the week. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Pontecchio. Does anyone know? It's a city
correct.
in Italy.
Well, there's Ponte Vecchio, which means old bridge, and they've left out the ve, so I'm figuring it's Pontecchio or Pontecchio.
Pontecchio.
Or
Okay.
Pontecchio.
Well, this is our code name of the week, and it's kind of an obscure code name, but kind of interesting. It's from the Microsoft Embedded Group, and what it's about is something called M2M, which is machine-to-machine connection. So this is what's going to allow people to use embedded products. And here's their quote: to streamline the way devices connect to network services to make data streams more predictable and efficient. So this is kind of them saying, hey, we're going to connect up all the insights that you're getting from your embedded devices so that you can analyze the data that comes in through these sensors and do all kinds of analytics with this pool of big data. So what you really need to know about Pontecchio, in whatever form it ships, I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be an operating system release or kind of an add-on to Windows Embedded or what. It's supposed to be out in a year or two, but it's going to be kind of what bridged big data and Windows Embedded, and it's something you're going to hear a lot more from Microsoft in the coming year especially. So just think, and whenever you hear about Windows Embedded, think this also ties into big data, and Pontecchio is part of the story.
Very interesting. Pontecchio. I like it. Mary Jo Foley, Paul Thurrott, we have come to the conclusion of yet another fabulous Windows Weekly episode. You can find Paul online at the SuperSite for Windows, winsupersite.com. He's also the news editor for Windows IT Pro, the author of Windows Phone Secrets, and secretly he's living underground in a bunker somewhere outside of Boston. And his motto, Le fin du monde est arrivé.
Right.
Yes. Mary Jo Foley is a beer maker who lives in New York City. And is...
Wow, I like
it's
my
the
new
dating
bio.
It's like an obituary.
She's a beer maker who lives in New York City and loves having fun with programmers of all kinds. Meet Mary Jo Foley. She's the author of the All About Microsoft blog at allaboutmicrosoft.com. And we do this show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time at twit.tv. Tune in live or watch after the fact, or listen after the fact, because we make audio and video available for download on all the finer podcast clients, including iTunes and the Zune Xbox Marketplace. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Windows Weekly. Stop it! What are you eating? Is that a brownie?
It's a double chocolate chip cookie from Acre.
That's no cookie.
Mm-hmm.
Double chocolate chip cookie from Acre. Why are you going to Starbucks when you could be going to Acre? Seriously.
My goodness.
Don't let that lady drive you. Tell her Acre's better. Acre's better. What are you getting at Starbucks that you couldn't get at Acre? All right, go ahead. Go to
Can we
to
put
Starbucks.
an order in too?
Yeah, what would you guys like?
Yeah, really.
My favorite part of
Espresso myself.
Tech TV, my favorite part that started happening in the screensavers, I guess because, I don't know, I had already done a show and I was tired, and we'd get an intern to go out, and the Starbucks order would come like 3 seconds before air. It was so fun. And the tray would, sometimes it would come after the show had started, and I wouldn't stop. I would say, bring it here! And we'd be on the air, and they'd bring it in. It was so awesome. Memories. All right, I'm ready to begin.
I could ask my wife to make espresso, but then she would just mock me.
Why? Does she not believe in espresso?
No, she believes in me making it myself.
Oh, yeah. Well, normally, this is why. The flu is sweeping the TWiT brick house.
Yep.
And John Slanina, who normally does, in fact, fetch my coffee, is not here. He is out ill. So I will not have the coffee today.
I'm sorry.
Okay, just have to paint in a few features on Paul's face.
Do you want me to grow like a handlebar mustache or something?
If this only had some ink on it. This is actually a capacitive brush for an iPad or a touch screen of some kind. Isn't that wild?
It actually has a dead human finger on the tip of it.
It does.